We are a volunteer organization, all volunteers, and your presence here helps us. Your being a part of the community is very important to us. Also, if you can make a donation, we do have donation baskets at either end of the room. We suggest a $10 donation, but anything that you might be able to contribute will be helpful. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I've decided not to go with the microphone. A couple of announcements before we start. We do have a mailing list. If you put your name and email on our mailing list, you can receive emails to let you know about upcoming lectures and events. I want to let you know that next month will be a lecture by Erica Lorenz, which is titled Jung, Spirituality, and the Body. And that will be on March the 1st, 7 o'clock here at Seeley Hall.
Is it the Friday?
It is.
Okay.
It's a Friday, yeah. If you have a phone, a cell phone with you, could you silence it now or put it on vibrate? That would be very helpful. It's difficult in the middle of a lecture to have a phone ring.
I don't mind, really.
I do. Thank you. I want to mention that the events, the lectures, most of our lectures are being recorded, audio and video. Sky is our audio engineer there, and her business is called Sky Lakagetis.
Sky Lakagetis, yeah.
Okay, she's going to say it. So it's Greek, and I don't speak Greek. But anyway, Sky Lakagetis Studios. If you should need any audio visual, I would highly recommend her to you. After the lecture tonight, there will be a salon. This is a tradition that has been started a number of years back. After the lecture, we get together, we have tea, we discuss the lecture or anything that might come up. It's a way of getting to know people in the community, and it's a lot of fun, so I do want to invite you to that. Mark is our volunteer for the salon. If you see him after the lecture, he will show you where to go. I think he passed out some of these. If you got one of those, that will tell you how to get to the salon. And thank you, Mark, for doing that. I think that's, one other thing is that restrooms are out here. There's a men's room right out here, but any gender can use it. We will not have a bathroom break during the lecture, so if you need to use the bathroom, just go on out.
There's another bathroom like downstairs down there?
Yes, and there's another one downstairs.
Too, yeah.
What was the question? Oh, if anyone can help with posters, if you know of a great place to hang a poster, if you could just grab a couple of posters from the table for our next lecture and hang them up somewhere at the college, at the church, at the general store, any place that you might know of a great bulletin board, that would be very helpful to us. So, I think without further ado, I am going to introduce you to Carol Beauvais, and Carol is going to introduce our lecturer tonight, and you're in for a treat. Carol?
I think most of you know Anita Green. She has given lectures almost every year for the last 20 years. And I think her credentials are she's a Jungian analyst and a Rubenfeld synergist. She's a graduate of the C.G. Jung Institute of New York, and she's a training analyst at the Jung Institute in Boston. And we're lucky enough, of course, she has a private practice right here in Amherst. What can one say about Anita? She's amazing. You all know it. I think we know her for her intelligence, for her warmth, for her understanding of relationship and attachment, and embodiment. She is a pioneer. She brought the Rubenfeld technique to the Jungian work. So here she was. What year was it, Anita? Probably 19?
I can't remember. But
Yes. Anyway, a long time ago, she was brave enough to unite not her embodied training with the Rubenfeld and her Jungian training. So tonight we're going to have Anita Green revisiting Beauty and the Beast, my favorite fairy tale.
Is it yours too? It's mine. I didn't expect to see so many on this very cold night. And I'm so old, I probably shouldn't be here. But La Belle and La Bête, Beauty and the Beast, which is my favorite fairy tale, and still is. Once upon a time, and I hope all of you have had many once upon a times, as children, and later when something unexpected came to you. It was good. My family had around the Grimm's fairy tales. I don't know why, but I found it and I read all of them. They're pretty grim. And I love the way the two envious sisters got their comeuppance by having their eyes pecked out by birds. Now that is not usually in the regular fairy tale, but I hate the way they have been Disneyfied, which I call it. I meant to bring a small little frog that I was going to have sit right here. But the Frog Prince, I think you all know that one. This king's daughter had a lovely golden ball, which she loved to throw up in the air and catch in her hands. And one day, she threw it up and she could catch it, and it ran on the grass and into a deep well. There was an ugly frog around the well, and he came over and he said, "I can get your golden ball, but what am I going to get from you?" And she offered him all kinds of gold and crowns and objects. And he said, "No, I want to be your companion." Maybe this was the first Beauty and the Beast in terms of modern times. And he said, "I will get your ball, but you have to let me into your house, and you have to let me eat with you. I want to be a companion to you. I don't want any of this rich stuff. I want you," in a way he was saying. And she wanted that ball so badly that she promised the frog, the ugly frog, that she would do what he asked. And he dove right down and found it, put it in his mouth, came up, and went over and gave it to her. And she had her golden ball back again. But she said to herself, "He's just an ugly frog. I'm not going to honor the promise I gave him." And she ran away. Her father happened to overhear her promise, and he pulled his daughter back and said, "You have to keep your promises. Invite this frog in." Well, she didn't want to do that at all, but she did invite him in because she must obey her father. So the frog came in, and he said, "Here, pick me up. I can't jump. The table is so high." And she picked him up and put him by her plate, and he ate well off her plate. And she almost choked to death with that ugly frog sitting by her. And then he wanted to go up to her bedroom when she went to sleep. And he said, "Carry me up." So she carried him up the stairs, and She put him in the corner of the chamber farthest from her bed. And of course, he worked his way over to her bed, jumped up on it, and said, I want to sleep with you. And I'm going to sleep very well. Well, she hardly slept at all. And there was a growing anger and rage in her. And I was going to take this frog and slap him against the wall, because that's what she did. But I was watching a fairy tale Disneyfied, and she holds back her anger in this tale and kisses the frog, and that's when he turns into a handsome prince. So her anger is building up, and she takes this frog and she splats him against the wall, and she says, oh, be quiet, you ugly frog, and go back to the water where you belong. I had to learn from Grimm's fairy tales that it was an authentic feeling that was okay, anger. And she did it. She disobeyed her father, and she took that ugly frog and threw him and splattered him against the wall. And then she said, get out. Be quiet. Go home to your water where you belong. And at that point, he turned into a gorgeous prince. And of course, she fell in love with him. So it isn't kissing the frog that works so well. It's throwing him against the wall. And the prince is hidden inside the frog. So I was going to unzip the frog and show you the prince he turns into. But I forgot to bring it because we're rushing to get here. Yes.
I just want to say, it really did work.
Yes, it really did work. And that's where I learned from Grimm's fairy tales that an authentic feeling was okay to have. I didn't learn it from my parents at all. And I actually read most of the tales, although I don't remember them all of them to this day. But they aren't Disney-fied. And she throws the frog against the wall, and the two envious sisters of Cinderella get their eyes picked out. I thought, as a child, that was the most appropriate punishment. And the grim of these were, I liked them. The better, I liked them. So, having read Grimm's fairy tales, I do not like the sense that they have become Disneyfied and made okay. These Grimm's fairy tales were written for adults, and the greatest criticism is that children shouldn't read them. It makes the sex too direct, and children should know about that. And it also makes the violence very prominent, and children shouldn't know about that either. But I wanted to know about that, and I read all those fairy tales, and because it was such an invitation to the magical realm of being, and I hope you all had some of that. And I really pity those that haven't had that yet. This is a timeless invitation into the magical realm of being. And you yourselves, those of you who came, might want to consider if your favorite fairy tale, and I will ask you to present that, had any, reflects any of your hopes and longings in life. Just think about that a moment. And has any relationship to your choice of career or studies? So think what your favorite fairy tale was, if you have one, and think about why you liked it so much as a child. I had the experience of a middle-aged woman coming to me. This story seems unbelievable, but it's absolutely true. She loved the ugly duckling stories, and she found a fairy tale about an ugly princess, And even though she was made beautiful by the end of the tale, she loved that tale because it was an ugly princess. But most of all, she loved the ugly trolls that live under bridges and frighten the people as they try to cross over. She loved those trolls. In graduate school, she became a doctor, and then she became a plastic surgeon working with children who had facial deformities. I'm not sure how much she worked with other deformities, but she wanted to make these children playing with their playmates and ordinary people to not be scorned and diminished. And it was this fairy tale about trolls and ugly ducklings and an ugly princess that made her love those deformities in children. And she actually made a career of repairing the deformities in their, particularly their face. So they could go to their friends and not be diminished or scorned. And my favorite fairy tale was Beauty and the Beast. La Belle and La Bête. It's a French fairy tale. And it was told by a woman, one of the first women to even write a fairy tale. And she was an incredible woman. Let's see if I have something about her. Yeah, I do. But I'll come to that later. Excuse me. As I say, I shouldn't have come out tonight.
Thank you for coming.
I had no inkling that Beauty and the Beast would become the paradigm for my own inner journey. I realized when I started my first analysis that I had a really split off body complex. I didn't like my body very much. And, but I became one of the first analysts to consider body and psyche as one. You know, the don't touch aspect of psychoanalysis has long been entrenched in psychoanalytic studies. And I was one of the first, if not the first, to study body work and bring a kind of touch technique. And one of my patients looked up to me and he said, I've never experienced hands before that didn't require something. So I learned how not to, I do not like people who think they can do body work, but haven't been trained in a kind of touch that has worked through the complexes that you have about your own body, because you're likely to touch people with your own complexes, psychic complexes. And I have attempted all my life to integrate the imaginal, of which I had a great deal of imagination as a child. I used to play all kinds of games. And the emotional and the somatic dimensions of psyche. For body and psyche are one. Now, even Jung couldn't find the language to describe that. And I have a quote from Jung that I want to use. This came in 1933, back when he was a psychiatrist at the Bergolzi Clinic in Zurich. And he was quite a young man in his 30s, I believe. He said, and I didn't get this going on a PowerPoint, the body lays claim to equal recognition, like the psyche, it also exerts a fascination. If we are still caught by the old idea of an antithesis between mind and matter, it may even divide us against ourselves. But if we can reconcile ourselves to the mysterious truth that the spirit is the living body seen from within, and the body the outer manifestation of the living spirit, the two being really one, then we can understand why the striving to transcend the present level of consciousness through acceptance of the unconscious must give its due to the body. Now, he couldn't find a language that's some word that psyche, soul, of psyche, body is one. But he said it in a way that I think if you don't have a body, you can't have soul. Because it's spirit coming through, having intercourse with an embodied self that creates soul. And I don't believe without a body, you could be sitting here with great souls. So, that is a quote of Jung, and he has many other quotes that I could use when he began to feel that body and psyche were one. So Beauty and the Beast were part of my growing up, and I never knew that they produced a paradigm for my life's journey. I had become aware of my split-off body complex very early, but I became even more aware of it when I started analysis and training. And I found in a dream a child of no more than 4 or 5, perhaps she was younger, that was locked in a cellar. And that was part of me, a child I could grow up and be more of. And she, I told my analyst, my first analyst, this dream at the end of the session. And then I felt the tears come to my eyes. Well, I don't cry easily because I always hid my tears in a pillow so my mother wouldn't guess that I had any tender feelings. So I became aware of the split-off body complex. And Beauty and the Beast is about a woman who goes to live in a beast castle to save her father's life. I will read the fairy tale to you, and I have some wonderful pictures. This is from the 1946 first film by Jean Cocteau. It had French language and English subtitles. And this beast is Marvel's beast. And there have been many different kinds of beasts, of course. Lion beasts and pig beasts, and I don't know what you would call this one. But they always had incisors sticking out of their mouth like beasts did. So I have been spending all of my life trying to embody myself. And I have been thinking of body and psyche as one. So I thought, why don't I bring this to my patients? And I did. I used to work on a mat on the floor, but I'm old now, so I work on a massage table. But I use gentle hand techniques that seem to move people to their most difficult problems. I remember I always prepare myself so I'm always grounded and breathing so that I don't bring myself into the patient as I could if I hadn't been trained with these kinds of body techniques. As I say, since body and psyche are one, and I experienced that long ago in a dream of a child locked in a cellar, I have been working to embody myself all my life. And I think that is going to be a problem when I have to leave the body when I die, because I'm not going to want to. I've gotten used to it, and I've been embodied. Marie-Louise von Franz, an early Jungian, she's written innumerable books on fairy tales. And if you want to find out further about fairy tales, I urge you to read Marie-Louise von Franz. She says, and I quote her, "Fairy tales revere the bare bones of the psyche and universal patterns of human behavior. Unlike folk tales, legends, and some myths, they are relatively free of cultural material. They speak of, I have never read a fairy tale that deals with an inconsequential matter. They are more like polarities that exist in all of us, between life and death, love and betrayal, wealth and niggardliness, and so on. They deal with very important things. And the energy flows between them, between the poles in ourselves, in fairy tales. Fairy tale language seems to be, according to von Franz, international language of all humankind. I used to say mankind, but I don't say that anymore. When people began to collect fairy tales in the 18th century, they were amazed by the enormous number of recurrent themes that appeared again and again throughout the centuries and across ethnic, religious, and national boundaries. They were amazed. And Beauty and the Beast has been around for a long, long time. And there are not only beast bridegrooms, but there are beast brides who have to work through things in order to become human again. And some very difficult tests. Fairy tales, because of underlying themes that affect all humanity, are often filled with affects, and affects we don't want to even think belong to us, like greed and terror and envy. Usually fairy tales have, if they have older sisters, they become envious of the younger one. They're not real people in fairy tales. They represent the polarities in us between goodness and evil. And you're either beautiful, 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 or you're ugly, ugly, ugly. There's no in between. The good queen mother, for example, and the bad stepmother. The hero, or the evil wizard. The wise women woman or the cruel, ugly witch. They tend to deal with opposites in us and the struggle we have to bring them, to integrate them into our embodied soul. And they always deal, as I've said before, with very primal themes. Love, loss, as I said, loyalty, betrayal, terror, and and fairy tales always relate to the natural world. I'm sorry, I've got to drink some water or I'm going to lose my voice. They always deal with the natural world. There's always a town or community or city where the rational and the orderly goes forth, except for New York, probably. And then there's, how many of you have seen Stephen Sondheim's magnificent musical play, Into the Woods? He gets it right. The first act is always the fairy tale, as it is. And the second act is Into the Woods. And things happen that never happen in the fairy tales. And they kind of fall apart, but they have great dynamic in them. I'm thankful that some of you have seen that Into the Woods. And most important of all, the heroine or the hero in the fairy tale must trod a path that he does not know the outcome beforehand. And that is very important, because that is like the inner journey that you might take with a therapist or a psychoanalyst. You don't know how it's going to come out. You don't know what you're going to find. It's like this discovery of a land, and there's not much in this world anymore that is not discovered in terms of land. But it's very much like that. You don't know how it's going to come out. But it's never the older brothers and sisters who find the path that is worn and not used. It's always the youngest, or the dumplings that haven't got too much brain power, that really listen to what's happening in the woods and the rustling of the leaves. And they usually find the cave or the path or the hole which leads them to the treasure, or how to undo the trance that someone might be in. For Jungians and other therapists, this, I said, is a paradigm for the analytic process or the process of therapy. We don't know how it's going to turn out. And especially, people don't come to me, and I don't take any people, usually under 40 anymore, because they need to have some life experience. And I am old enough to be older than most of them are. And they like that. So especially in the second half of life, which Jung calls the second half of life, we might have to divide it into thirds now, because we live so much longer. The first half of life is developing a career or having children or whatever. And the second half of life, and particularly old age, is coming to accept who you are really and deeply. Most people don't come into therapy to find out where they are, unless they're in the second half of life. And I much prefer those people because they've had a certain experience. And we need to discover, it's very tough to change. People come into therapy and they say, I want to change. But, who would they be if they weren't like what they've been before? And it's kind of scary, really, to find that hidden path that hasn't been used in the backyard of our psyches and go down it. Okay. I am going to read you. First of all, I want to ask you, do you have a favorite fairy tale? And maybe some of you would be willing to say what it is and reflect on how it's changed your lives. You can do that now if you want. Or still think about it, yes.
And can it be a story that's not a fairy tale, but that's a story that affects you, or only fairy tale? Okay. The movie Chocolat has this story of a woman who comes to a village with her chocolates. And it's a very closed down village physically and even emotionally and sexually. And she brings this chocolate in this beautiful, luscious way with an ancient prayer. Basically, it's medicinal chocolate from the Mayans that she comes from. and right? So when she comes to this very repressed French village where people have to do everything, they have to do Lent and they have to fast, she breaks open the whole village into the sensual pleasures, emotional pleasures, sexual pleasures, and there becomes an intensity where the minister of the town wants to, stop her and disappear her and make her evil and keep everybody from eating chocolate and he eventually becomes completely in a meltdown of desiring chocolate himself, where she has now brought this medicine to the village and she's melted everybody's hearts. Everybody has come more into love and sensuality and sexuality and their joy. And so this has been my story for years. I think I've watched that movie maybe 50 times.
Is it a particular movie?
Yes, it's a movie. It's called Chocolat. It's with Juliette Binoche.
Chocolat.
Yes, yes. And every time I see it, the music is delicious, but the trance that's my life path. I want to bring this chocolate back, the feminine. The deep feminine is what it was about to me. But she's moved by these mystical powers of the wind and her ancestors, and she's not in complete control of her own destiny until she surrenders. This is not just the wind and my ancestors. This is me. I want to do this chocolate thing. It's not just given to me from the ancestors. That was it.
And how has it affected your life? Can you think of it?
Oh, yes. Well, I'm getting more and more risky as time goes on.
Okay.
So I started with exotic dancing when I was younger, which was a sin because I came from feminists who were really upset with me.
I bet they are.
Yeah. But it was a prayer to enter a realm of discovering the taboo, and then eventually coming into healing work, and then. But that wasn't luscious enough. And then coming into dance, and then the way dance is forbidden to women. And most men I dated, getting really scared of my dancing and saying, stop dancing at a certain point. And then from there going to creating a love life show for men so that they can come back to their inner feminine and taste the chocolate and be okay with that and not be afraid of what happens to you when you surrender to the chocolate. Like how that breaks open all of your life, all of your desires, all of your luscious, things that are forbidden and taboo.
Forbidden, yes.
Right? Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Thank you very much. Anyone else that would like to? Okay.
Yeah, I think A Christmas Carol the story by David.
Christmas Carol.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, because even as a kid, I think I identified with Scrooge. And,
Oh, did you?
Yeah, but he gets saved, so you know
he does.
He
Yes.
goes through all these scary experiences, and he kind of gets redeemed. So yeah, I've always liked that, and the possibility of somebody being stingy and unhappy, but he gets saved in the end. And yeah, I still even like it now, especially the movie version. I never read the book.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
But the movie version was quite good.
Oh, it's great.
How has it changed your life?
I don't know. It changed my thinking about a lot of things, like don't be so tight, don't be so, try to give a little more. Yeah, whatever the giving means is all kinds of giving.
Thank you. Anyone else?
A Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid.
Oh, The Little Mermaid.
Hans Andersen's Little Mermaid.
And how has that affected your life?
Well, I came from Britain, and I did feel that in order to survive in America, I had to lose certain things.
Okay.
And she cuts her tail and loses her voice for a while in order to marry the prince. So that element of yearning and longing and transformation and sacrifice.
That's a very sad tale originally, though.
Yeah.
She has to go back, and she stays there because she's a mermaid.
Yeah.
Did you come to the sense that you could be whoever you are?
Not without sacrifice.
Not without sacrifice, I see. Okay. Anyone else? Go ahead.
I've always liked the tale of Rumpelstiltskin, Snowy's daughter.
Rumpelstiltskin, yes.
Yes. And, one of my favorite parts is, here's this clever guy, and he's already got her beat before the game starts, but she outsmarts him. And it takes a bit, but, cleverness, she was able to outsmart him and stay a step ahead of him, even though her father set her up for failure, but she wins in the end. And I also like, in the original telling of it, he's so upset that he jumps into midair and rips himself into two pieces, as opposed to pounding his way through the floor, as in most of the tellings we've heard it. But, it's been a reoccurring theme to me that, it helps me maintain perspective. Family comes before all the riches of the world, but it takes a bit of a journey to get to that realization. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
Gift of the Magi.
Gift of the Magi.
And
Bringing the gifts from a distance to Jesus in the stable.
it's about Henry.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess the premise is this couple, if you will, don't have very many means. And they want to give each other a gift.
Oh, right.
And so one cuts her hair to get the other, to get her beloved a gift. And I can't remember what he gives her.
Comb.
He gives her a comb.
I mean, right, but what does she...
Watch.
Right. He sells...
Okay.
So they are sort of giving parts of themselves away in order to make space for what's real, I guess. It's not the object. It's the deep heart intention.
And how has it changed your life? Or affected your life? Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
I'm not sure. Maybe it has to do with intention. gifting in a way that's not the way we in the society expect.
Okay.
The simplicity of life, the joy of just being, or being with another without it having to have a lot of stuff around it.
Thank you. Oh, I am going now to tell you the tale of Beauty and the Beast. And I have some pictures to, let's see if they work. Here's the, excuse me, I've got to do this somehow. There was once upon a time, I always start that way, there was a wealthy merchant who lived with his 3 daughters and 3 sons. His wife had died long before. Sometimes it's 6 daughters, sometimes it's 12 daughters and 12 sons. And I'm sure his wife had died of childbirth because she was giving birth so many times. The children filled his life, and his business gave him little time to be lonely. He was a wealthy merchant who had ships on the sea. And one day he heard that they had all been wrecked from storms. And he was of great wealth and was thrown into dire poverty. Now that is often a theme of fairy tales. It's as if when we're served things on a platter, so to speak, we don't have, oh, this came off my ear. Can you fix it? I'm sorry. I forgot that was on my ear, and yeah. Being wealthy and moving into dire poverty is something that's a common theme in a fairy tale. The Handless Maiden, maybe some of you were at that the other several weeks ago. And the Handless Maiden, this dire poverty. And he doesn't know how to tell his family. He's still in a very wealthy place. You can see all the things around. Beauty stands behind him, trying to console him. The older sisters, older sisters are usually envious of the younger one's beauty. And she was a very beautiful woman, girl. She was probably 14 to 16, marriageable age in those days. But she turned down every proposal that she had because she wanted to stay with her father and to help him in old age. And usually one of the daughters, usually the one that didn't get married, stayed with the elderly people and helped them out. But Beauty has a much greater road. And she's the father's favorite daughter because she really loves him. And you can see the arrogance in the face of the 2 sisters. And here they move, and the only house he hasn't lost is a little house outside the village in the woods. And it's cut off from the city, and the sisters erroneously think that they're still going to have proposals of marriage when they don't have wealth. But they don't. And actually, you can see their arrogance in their face, and they let the youngest, Beauty, do a lot of the tasks they could be helping her with. because they say, who would give a marriage proposal to one with rough and dirty hands? So they don't even wash the dishes at night. And Beauty takes on, she gets up at 4, takes on and makes breakfast for the whole family. And she does help her brothers out in the fields. And they have to live closer to the earth. They have to plant and they have to take care of animals because that is their food. And the girls have to become servants again and do all the dirty housework. So the sisters refuse to do that. Beauty has a hard time at first because she's never worked so hard. But then hard work seems to welcome her into better health. So she's a very healthy woman. Then they get settled into, you can see the animals around, and Beauty's very good with animals, and that's good because she's going to be living in the Enchanted Beast Castle. Anyway, let me see what's the next one. The father hears that a ship of his has not been destructed by the storm and is coming into port, and he goes about to goes to the port to see if he can salvage anything. But his creditors have been there before him. He starts out in the summer and he travels a long distance to the port and he comes back poorer than before. And he gets lost at night in a forest. And then he sees lights that lead him to a magical palace where the beast is, who has been, he tells the story in the fairy tale that an ugly witch-type woman has come to test him to see if he is likable, evidently. And he doesn't give, because she's so ugly, he doesn't give her any money or food. And she puts a trance on him to be beast-like until someone loves him enough as the beast, and then he will be changed back to the prince. So he is there, and the father on the horse walks into the palace grounds. He sees no one around. He walks up the agate steps to the castle, and he looks in a lot of the rooms, and he sees no one around. And then he sees a fire lit in a great hall, and a table pulled up for one. And he thinks, well, the master of this house is expecting someone tonight, so I might be he. And he sits down, and he can no longer not eat. He eats a chicken in the fairy tale in 2 bites. And then he looks around for the master of the house to thank him. And there's no one around. And he looks and he looks, and he finally finds a room with a bed in it, and he goes to sleep. And he sleeps so soundly, he doesn't wake up until 10 the next morning. Now, let me see here. This is the beast. And he isn't activated until the father gets up in the morning and he sees that good hot rolls have been set by his bedside, and he eats breakfast, and then he goes and gets his horse, who has found a stable to be in, and he walks by a garden with roses in it. The beast castle is always warm and sunny. It doesn't, the snow has come because the father has taken so long to go to the port that it's winter and the coldness and the snow. But the beast castle is in sunshine and warm. And he is a gardener. And he has tended these roses. And he says, he lets out a roar, and the father is terrified, and rightly so. And although the beast is wearing clothes of a prince or king, he's still a beast. And the father turns around and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. You were so generous that I thought a rose would be okay to take." Now, this has deep archetypal significance because the red rose is the flower of Aphrodite, later called Venus, the goddess of love and sexuality. It is not for the father to give to the daughter. And this activates the beast, I think unconsciously, to let out a roar. He later picks a rose, and he himself gives this to Beauty before she wanted one. Because in this patriarchal land, none grow. It is in the beast garden that these red roses grow. So he offers to take them to Beauty. And he gets on a horse which takes him right to his very poor farmhouse. And his daughters and sons meet him, and he says, the beast says, "If you can find one of your daughters to come here, and she must know who I am and how terrible I am, and that I don't speak English very well, or French very well, but I will, and I roar some of the time. She must know exactly what she's coming into and willingly comes." That is important. Willingly comes to the house. And this is the Last Supper. And she does. She goes out and she finds the horse that has taken her father home. And she goes directly to the palace. She is making up her own mind at this point. She decides to leave the father's house. And she doesn't even know how this is going to come out, whether the beast is going to eat her or not for dinner. And so she goes, follows the father. The father doesn't want any of his daughters to go with him, but she insists. And she takes a journey that she doesn't know the outcome. And here they're having their Last Supper together before he leaves in the morning. And the beast comes in around 7 p.m., when he usually does. And Beauty is absolutely terrified. But she sees in his eyes that he is very sad. The beast is very sad. And she thinks it must be because he's so lonely in this castle all by himself. So they have a Last Supper together, and Beauty still sees, she sees the beast. Now, this is the final farewell. That's the father and his horse. And this is Beauty crying because she's saying goodbye to the father and on her own journey. So he's going. Now, she asks the beast what he does all alone, what he does in the morning. And the beast says, "Don't ask me that, Beauty." And she does again. And he says, "Well, I'm a beast. I must go out and kill my prey for my meat. I can't sit as graciously as you can at the dinner table at night. So she learns not to ask him questions because somewhere he remembers what it's like to be a human man. And so she refrains from asking him questions that might embarrass him. And then we see, as I said in my blurb, that she gets to know this beast and becomes afraid no more. There's no fear. And he has been to many lands, and he tells her about the lands that he visited. They look at plays and puppets together, and they laugh, and they clap, and they get to know each other. And she's not afraid of any more of this kind beast. And yet he doesn't change. He's still a beast. So the spell he is put under, that he has to find human love that will love him as a beast. And then he can change back into, wait a minute. Here, they're clapping and they get to know each other. So I say in the blurb that they become friends. And every time before he goes upstairs to a separate bedroom, he says, "Will you marry me? Will you be my wife?" And Beauty is fearful of saying no at first, but she knows she can because the beast can take it. So she says, "No, I will not marry you." And then finally she says, "No, I will not marry you because I do not love you." And that's an entirely new thing that Beauty has learned. Then she has dreams at night. I think this is what I liked about the fairy tale, that she has dreams of a gorgeous prince that comes to her in the dream. She doesn't put the two together, ever, that the beast and the prince are one. But she also thinks the beast has him locked up in some dungeon down below. And she wants to find the prince. So she has dreams that enable her to sleep very well for the night. She doesn't, when she she looks at a mirror. Let's see, I don't think I have that one. Yeah. She also has a dream of a woman, an old woman, in a boat that tells her not to be fooled by ugly things. And the beast is very ugly. Not to be fooled. And she doesn't seem to put that together. But then she asks the beast if she can go back to the father because he is ill and going to die. And the beast says, "I cannot deny you anything you ask." But he makes her promise to come back by the 3rd week and see him, or he says he will die without her. So she gets on a horse and she goes back home, and let's see, there she is on this wonderful horse that takes her immediately to the farmhouse. And she sees her father, and he, seeing her, gets immediately well. And he hears her whole story, and he almost gets it. He becomes more of a friend and mentor than a father to her. And he says, "Look to this woman who tells you not to be fooled by appearances of anybody. And maybe you should marry the beast, he says. Amazing. He becomes more of a mentor than a father. And then Beauty looks into the mirror again, and she sees the beast is dying, and she has a choice to make. Either her father, and her father is seductive, because he says, we'll send all the daughters to be married and all the sons can go away and we can live in a small house and you can take care of me for the rest of my life. And he invites her to stay with him. And she has to make the choice. And she moves back to the beast. She gets on the horse. She can ride a horse as one rides a horse these days. And she finds the beast in the garden, dying. And she says, I am the monster because I have not come back as I said I would. And she takes that on herself, and she hugs the beast. I think this is my final one. And she says how much she loves him. It took her time away from the beast. And she says, I love you. And then he begins to change. And she is ambivalent about his changing into a handsome prince, because she knows the beast will always tell her the truth, but she's not sure the prince will. So she has learned to say the truth with the beast always, and to express herself as exactly as how she feels. And so she's ambivalent about him becoming a prince again. But he does. There he is. So she has fulfilled the nature of the trance that was on him. And he, of course, changes into a handsome prince. That does not always happen. Beauty and the Beast is still alive in my practice. Maybe because I like this story so much that some of their unconscious picks up on it. But I had a young woman who came to me. She was a smallish woman with almost a childlike voice. Her father was a publisher of a journal, and she became the only heir. She was an only child, and so the father left his publishing business to her. And she came to me and she said, I don't even matter. They go about their business and they don't even listen to me. And I looked at her and I saw how small she was and with this voice. And she had a dream in which she left the confines of the town and went down to the forest. And she was met by a gorilla-type man. And she was rather attractive. And I had her do what Jungians call active imagination. But you have to make the patient safe first before they can have dialogue with a beast, for example, or a gorilla man. So we managed a chain link fence around her, and then she could talk to the beast. And he said he'd been out of civilization so long, he needed her to come back in, but he wanted to. And she had many conversations with this beast. So she needed to get in touch with a sense of herself and to speak with a louder voice and make these male editors, that's for what they were, listen to her. And she told me later that it wasn't like the man she had hoped to marry, that was more paternal like her father was, and vulnerable and very sensitive. She needed a real beast in order to come into her and to speak and be heard. And she began to develop that. And her whole body changed, and she felt her energy going into the ground. And her voice changed too. And she finally could make these editors listen to her. So that is how Beauty and the Beast. And then I have a dream of mine. I was sure someone was outside my house, and I went around and checked all the doors, and I locked them, but I forgot one in the back. And they were creatures trying to get in. I don't know what they were, but they were bad. And in the end of the dream, I'm pushing with all my strength to keep the door closed, and they're pushing with all their strength to get in. And the message of the dream was that if I didn't let these creatures in, I wouldn't be able to grow anymore. That was the message of the dream. So Beauty and the Beast is not dead in our culture at all. And let me see. I would like to turn this over to you, and maybe we can leave early this cold night, but I would like, some of you have been reflecting more on fairy tales. What do you think of this fairy tale? Is that one of your favorites too? Yes.
I am here tonight because La Belle et la Bête is my favorite fairy tale.
Is it?
Yes. I was living in New York in my 20s. I'm in my 60s now. And I think I saw the Cocteau film, I can't even remember how many times.
Yes. It's an excellent film.
It's an incredible film.
Yeah.
And the question, how has it changed my life? It's still changing my life. I think to this day, and I had this book, to this day I well up at certain points in the...
I do too, yes. I was glad to immerse myself in Beauty and the Beast again. I still think it's my favorite fairy tale.
Yeah.
And I know it is. Yeah.
It is, and I think all these years I've been in the alchemy, cooking the inner marriage. Like the moment where she enters the castle in the film and the candelabras come alive and light her way.
Yes, yes.
Feels like she's entering the magic castle of her own. She's going to meet herself. I could feel it intuitively.
Yes.
And I also had a charismatic, seductive father, and I have not married, which is very interesting to me, and not without some feelings.
Yes, exactly.
So this fairy tale speaks to me at so many levels. I identify with both the Beast and Beauty, and recently dreamt that I was a robot covered in metal, and a human man was loving me. And so
that's wonderful.
I think it's been changing my inner life in ways that I still can't know. So I really appreciated immersing a bit more in it after all these years. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I wanted to tell you that one of my patients actually met a gorilla man, and it's exactly what she needed, not a sensitive, paternal man. And she finally found someone of that nature. So she worked very well. And anyone else? Oh, yes.
childhood educational standpoint, I'm looking at this and seeing, and I could be wrong, female psyche being attracted to the beastly aspect of man, and boys being in school now, that type of behavior being cut out and not encouraged. The assertive, the beastly aspect of boys are being bred out, so to speak, through drugs and ADHD diagnoses. What's that implication for the future, where you've got boys who have been somewhat emasculated?
I think you have to get together. Women have always done salons. They used to get together, at least the aristocratic women, when they had time on their hands, and they would pay, especially when they couldn't get into the schools or the universities, and they would pay for someone to come and teach them. Women have been doing this for centuries, getting together. And I think men, because I think the patriarchal age is finally dying, and this is one of the fairy tales which show it, need to get together and talk about their sexuality and all kinds of things. Do you think they can? No, men need to get together to make a salon. They're not used to doing that. And the culture is still very strong that boys shouldn't cry, for example, and boys have to be more aggressive than girls. And they aren't, in my experience, touched as much when they get to a certain age within the family. And I don't know whether that is a male experience here or not. Yeah.
Yes, you mentioned a dream you had where these monsters were trying to get into the house, and there was a door that was slightly open and you were pushing against the door. It reminded me, you were talking about a dream almost exactly I had when I was a child, where the animals got out of the zoo, or they escaped from the zoo, and there were these wild animals, and I was in a house I was in our own house, all by myself, and I was a child, or I was young, and then I was scared that the animals from the zoo were going to get into the house, and I was so scared. And when you mentioned that I was taking notes. It's a wonderful talk, and these visuals are so powerful. I could listen to you for hours. And you mentioned something like the theme of the dream you had, or the takeaway was, if I don't let these monsters in, I can't grow. And I was thinking, it kind of a light bulb went in my head, like if I didn't let these. In my interpretation, the animals were feelings, because I just shut
feelings,
down.
Yes.
Like, men don't cry.
No, men don't cry. They don't have
and
feelings they express.
Yeah, and you just tough it out. You don't show weakness. I mean, it sounds stupid now, but and how I lost that the emotional side, or at least the outward showing of the emotion, and. Then I was thinking of my boys. I'm pretty close to both my boys, but I'm not sure if I pass that on to them, where they don't, I don't know. It goes from generation to generation,
I know it does.
But how do I, it's so, I feel like I'm in a straitjacket, like I'm still in that house, and I'm still afraid inside, and I'm still that little boy.
Yes.
And I don't want to be that anymore.
Wow.
I mean,
well, it takes certain risks, obviously. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you can express more feelings to these sons of yours.
Yeah. And I have men friends I get together with, and we talk about a lot of stuff. I mean, so it's not. It's. I'm just jealous of women. I think I need women in my life to teach me to be more human. I mean, men, like Carl Whitaker, this family therapist I like, I went to a workshop and he got in front of this big group and he said, we men are just helpless. We just fall in love with politics and cars and things and theories. And women fall in love with people. He said, we're all helpless. We're hopeless. Anyway, but thanks for your lecture. It was wonderful.
Go ahead.
Something that occurs to me listening to what he was talking about, but also the fairy tale, is that the beast says, you know, I'm a beast, so I have to go hunt and kill.
Yes, exactly.
And it's the instinctual.
Yes.
And it really comes through to me as I was thinking about wild animals trying to get in, you know, like that we're so cut off from our deep instincts and they're so Disneyfied. We can be.
I was,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Or like if we're in touch with them, it's somehow we need to calm down or we need to, you know, kind of flatten that. So the beast is really, I love that he's in his princely clothes and at the same time tooth and claw, integrated, like together.
And
Powerful.
the side, to me, the side of his nature that's kind of the higher, represents the higher part of his nature is that he must give her freedom.
Right.
He cannot deny her. Where he could easily subdue her and use the claws to, you know, capture, you know.
That's right.
So, to me, that's the amazing moment in the story where he is able to express this much higher kind of integrity of freedom, honoring freedom.
He can let go.
Yeah. And,
For her.
right.
Did anyone of you happen to see, it happened some years ago now, Ron Perlman became Vincent the Beast that was a genetic disaster. He was abandoned as an infant because he was all fur and his parents couldn't stand to see him. But this was on television and it was on every week. And Ron Perlman played Vincent in a most convincing way. He had fur all over his body and long hair, but underneath he was a sweetheart. And he, in one of his, he was adopted by a very wealthy father. And I think it took imagination to put this series on. Did anyone see it? Ron Perlman and Linda, I can't remember the name of Beauty, but it was on TV for a whole year, and I watched it every week because I was fascinated by this new beast. I mean, his clothes were cut from sleeping bags, and but when a vote went out as to who the sexiest men were on TV, he was right at the top. And he had such a seductive voice, and he played it so well. He had saved this rather socialite attorney from being attacked by thugs who used razors. And then he took her down, and this wealthy man had adopted him. And he had made a utopian city right in the steam tunnels that connect with the subway tracks underneath Manhattan. I thought that took a lot of imagination. I mean, it couldn't be more dank, probably, than those steam tunnels are. But that's where the beast had grown up and married this very wealthy man who had built a utopian city underneath New York, Manhattan. And it was only on for a year, and I really missed its loss because then they were facing something that I didn't think they knew how to solve. Would the beast and the beauty, Ron Perlman and Linda somebody, have sex together, or would they fall in love? They were soulmates, but only on a platonic level. And it was hard to keep a series going without moving it along. And everything was on the table. So I wondered what they would have come up with when they confronted. They were very attracted to each other. But, you know, a long sigh and reading poetry together really doesn't make it for very long on the TV.
Maybe a book.
But he was a wonderful beast. Did anyone see that? Several? Oh, you did, back there. Yeah, yeah.
Very memorable. It's making me wonder about the connection of women wanting bad boys.
Yes.
If it's really wanting the wild man within themselves that they can't
Yes,
express.
exactly. It's getting connected to the wild beast, and internally as well as externally. And men have carried more of that, I think. I don't know, you men that are here, what you think about that. But the culture is very strong that men do not express volatile emotion. And I couldn't imagine being in a marriage where I couldn't do that. Go ahead. There's my man there.
I have a number of stories that support what's just been said. I'll tell one of them. I've shared it.
Can everyone hear? Okay. Yeah.
I've shared it in one of
I don't know which story he's going to tell.
It was a situation where, I can't remember the details, but I was taken over by a intense rage at Anita, and I was volcanic in my reaction to her and said everything that you could imagine. And she stood there looking me in the eyes and not seeming totally intimidated or overwhelmed. It's fairly difficult to overwhelm her. And finally I finished my explosion and I said, "You didn't deserve all that." And her response, which is part of why I think we got married, was, "There, I've always known I was a bitch, but you're just discovering what a bastard you are."
And I was very glad for it. Go ahead. No, to you. Yes.
I've been, familiar with the story and loved it as a child and continued to love it and appreciate it being brought there again. But I'd never heard the part which you mentioned of why he was enchanted, and I found that fascinating tonight. And I can you say again? I think the reason is because he was.
This was the story he told. There are many stories of why he was enchanted. Yes.
Okay, but the story in this story that he tells
in the fairy tale,
is that he was too proud to.
Well,
he looked down his nose.
He looked down his nose at this ugly old woman.
Okay.
And then she put him in a trance.
To experience that.
To experience that
himself.
rejection.
Yeah. So his self-knowledge is a part of the story.
Yes.
And
yes.
That's
it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, kind of going along those same lines, I find the story the fairy tale a little unconventional because usually it's the hero or the heroine that undergoes the transformation, but to me it seems like it's really the prince who undergoes the transformation. She's always been a compassionate person, she's like this lovely person and she stays a lovely person. But he's the one who's the witch teaches him this lesson essentially, and we say, I mean, really, it's a curse. He gets
It's a curse, yes.
Yeah, and so if you could go at taking this, I mean, if you could view her as the anima of a man, then
Yeah.
and sort of he had to undergo this transformation in order to get a better relationship with the other man.
I couldn't agree with you more. This fairy tale, the Grimms are at least gathered, if not written, by the Grimm brothers. And no, women painted canvases, they wrote novels and poetry, they did lots of things, but men in the height of the patriarchal age only got recognized and published and shown in the galleries. So it wasn't that women weren't doing this, and this woman who wrote this, let's see, I have her name here. Well, it doesn't matter. She was a French woman. She lived in England for a time and must have married an English nobleman and brought up several children, so she knew English very well. And yet she wrote this fairy tale. It's the only one first published by a woman. And I think I liked it as a child because the woman was the heroine, She was the hero of the piece. And I agree with you that it's both the beast and the woman does say at the end, I am really the monster because I did not come as I said I would. So, well, that is, that's a change. But I agree with you that beauty is one of those people that is good, 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 and beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And her sisters are envious. But they have a right to be envious because she's loved by her father much more than they are.
Well, let's not ignore the trajectory, though, of her having to become much stronger in that time of poverty, to do all the work of the household, to take it on and to do it willingly, to take on this thing of the leaving the father,
exactly.
Of going to this other place, of the whole betrayal thing of having to go back to him in order to supposedly save him, and then getting mired again, not wanting to go back to the beast, but then finally being called and feeling that she has to do it, and finding out that he almost dies because she didn't keep her word. I mean, there's a whole series of incredible lessons that she's going through in order to be a person who can,
and she has to make the choice whether
else
to stay with the father or to go to her potential love.
And to acknowledge I am a monster by not honoring my commitment, by not doing what I said I would do, and then this person almost dies because of it. I mean, the trajectory of all of her learnings are very important because they have to do with following your heart and then speaking the truth and keeping your word and a whole bunch of things that are all implicit to that. I mean, it just
and she is ambivalent about the beast turning into the prince because she always got the truth from the beast and she isn't sure she will from the prince. So she came to respect that truth. Yeah. Okay.
Just to play devil's advocate for a moment, I love this story too. But when I think of all those nice church ladies voting Trump into office, I think that there was some notion that the beast was going to turn into the prince, and the beast hasn't turned into the prince, and that's sort of our lesson from the last 2 years.
Yes.
But I think that we have this romantic dream
that
if we love enough and are compassionate enough and are loyal enough, and that somehow
he will change.
He will change.
But I don't think he can.
No, I don't think he can either. But that's one of the stories that got him where he got.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Go ahead.
I know you put a question out there and kind of let it hang for a second. And you said, you know, at the end of the patriarchal age here, we come into the end of a long line of men with repressed emotions. Okay, and there's a lot of variables that tie into that. And I don't think it's so much on how much in touch they are with the feminine or the male or whatever archetype. I think it's a measure of the humanity, okay? I led 14 Marines through combat in the Amazon basin in triple canopy jungle for 6 months, okay? But when you were up there and you were talking about the timelessness of this tale, to be able to come back and still have the same value, the last panel you were looking at before where Beauty, she's in reflection of the betrayed promise, and knowing that his life hangs in the balance of her, and she, in that moment, she views herself as the monster. In that second, you know, tears burst out of my eyes, you know, and it's just, it's a wonderful tale, you know,
It is.
And the power it has to do that, you know, because men, it depends how in touch we are with the emotions, you know, and a lot of variables. But yeah, I just wanted, you know, there's two extremes.
Yeah. There was a hand up over here.
Yeah, yes. I think I was headed towards the facetious. I mean, you could also draw the conclusion that some things are worth becoming a fraud for. And she was
worth what?
Becoming a fraud.
Oh, becoming a fraud.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
He always told the truth, and then when he became the prince, he was, you know, he was a little suspect, but it was kind of worth it. And you know, for the final consummation, and you know, life goes on. And at first, you got the two types. You got the real man and the real woman, but that doesn't exactly work. So you get a little bit of hardening on her part and softening, or maybe being willing to lie on his part. And it comes together in, you know, wedded bliss. Life goes on.
Well, you know,
next generation.
All the hard work comes before marriage, and none after. And I can say they lived happily ever after hasn't particularly been true of our relationship, and it's going into its 68th year. I mean, I think I would have turned and run out the church if I had known that when I was married. But it's been worth it. I married a man I didn't have to change from a beast. He was very good looking. Yeah, he is now too. But I needed to get myself related to the beast in me. And I've been working on it all my life. You know, there are complexes in you that are easy to fix and can be worked through. And there are life's journeys that you keep at all the time. And you hope you make it till the end.
Anita?
Yeah.
When I was in my training, I did a year and a half in Zurich, Switzerland at the Jung Institute there with a wonderful woman analyst, Liliana Fry-Rohn, who had been analyzed by Jung for 15 years. So she had pretty deep insight into herself and the human psyche. And in that period of time in Zurich, I had a situation develop where I was taken over by an enormous amount of rage. I've already told you one story. Yes. I do feel that the freedom to express really deep powerful, aggressive anger and rage is part of becoming whole for many, many people, particularly if, like me, you grew up as a congregational minister's son and had two grandfathers who were ministers as well. I did fight in the Second World War. I helped to liberate a concentration camp, so I had seen plenty of the dark side of human nature as well. But anyway, while I was over there, I had an incident that brought out an enormous amount of murderous rage. So I went off by myself in the woods and sat under a tree and did what Jung calls an active imagination. And there appeared very quickly before me a large, brown, hairy ape. And I had gone ape. And I told him, I said, what the hell am I going to do with you? You are dangerous. You could kill somebody. You scare me. And this ape listened attentively, but calmly, and said to me, "There, you've had me locked up in a cage all your life, and I just got out, and I got news for you. I'm not going back in the cage." So we negotiated. He then said, "You have a choice. I can either be your ally or I can be your adversary, and that is your choice."
Oh.
And so I really have worked very hard. This beard that I wear now, so many years later, is part of the inheritance of that encounter. Used to be a big brown beard. And when I took all this to my wonderful woman analyst in Zurich, and she listened to it, and I had made a picture of the big brown hairy ape and then me standing next to him. Only I hadn't, you do this with your unconscious, so I hadn't really seen what I created. And she studied it, and then she held it up before me, and she said, "There, you have drawn a magnificent ape who is powerful and impressive and a bit intimidating. But when I look at the way you drew yourself, you're very bland." She said, "Speaking as a woman, I prefer the ape." My mother never would have said that. That was a turning point for me. So I have an affinity with the story of Beauty and the Beast.
There are many men who need to come to terms with the instinctual beast, because I think soul comes through our instincts and the way we carry ourselves and the way we are in the world. It speaks in our bodies as well. And many men I have worked with have a split in the anima. Not that they don't need to come to terms with their masculine beast, as you did with the ape, but they have a split in their anima between, and that is the feminine side of a man, according to Jung. They have the good woman over here, the sort of the mother type, and they have the prostitute over here, and she's the one that gives pleasure, but they don't get together very much within a man. And I've found that over and over again. Not so much today, but in the past. Yeah. Anyone else? We want to, oh, okay, one more.
Yeah, as an adolescent and, trying to go out with girls, always got the message, I was always nice and well-behaved, and they didn't want anything to do with me. And I see these girls going out with these bad boys, and I'm going, do I have to mistreat these girls in order for them to like me? And my mother once said, never forget it, she said, basically what she said to me, I was too well-behaved. She said, we weren't talking about girls or anything, she just said in general, you're just too well-behaved, you're not, you need to get into the beast, or what, you can say that. The message with women of always, trying to draw this out. Some are more successful.